Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and as you can see, I am no longer in Tajikistan or Uzbekistan or anywhere remotely exotic, but I'm back home, looking a bit less bedraggled, not as sniffly or coffee, but able to reflect on the trip a bit more. And the reason that I'm doing this from at home and not from a hotel in Tajikistan is because, well, number one, on the day in question, there wasn't time, and I'll explain why there was never time to make a video, and I never did make one. But then I've also had a little bit of a crisis in that all the videos from that day, I thought I'd uploaded them all, and then so deleted all the video, like the original files, and then it turns out that some of the ones from that day haven't. So this video's got a lot more photos and a lot less footage than the other ones, but never mind. So we woke up in Khujand. Oh my God, very hot, but a wonderful place. And we went to explore the bits that we kind of hadn't managed to see the day before. But God, it was so hot, and I was not in a good place because in the middle of the night, the fan in my room, it wasn't an aircon, it had a fan, broke down, and so I was just so hot at night, sweating and sweating. And I'm talking now with the benefit of hindsight, that actually I think gave me kind of flu, which stuck around for a few days, and that's why I get very sniffly in later videos. But yeah, so I wasn't feeling great. But we went out and we went to the market, which was unbelievable. I mean, like, Central Asia is a great place for markets, but this is one of the best. Not that old, built by the Soviets in the 60s, but a bit of everything in there. Lots of different foods and then also other sections as well, like Tom bought some CDs. At least he thinks they're CDs. I think they're actually like DVDs of local music. And there was clothes, there was like house utensils, all that kind of stuff. Wonderful thing. And so we went there, and then got some money from the bank on the big square that the market kind of spills out onto the Registan, which of course means marketplace. And then went to the mosque next door. Now the mosque is not that old. It looked very good from a distance, but it's actually a bit of a new build. Although some of the outer buildings were quite old. But there's a shrine of a saint, and I forget his name, but I can put it in the chat. And his shrine is old. So I went to that, but unfortunately it was locked, although there were a couple of ladies who were praying to him outside the door. And I think that's interesting because Sufism doesn't seem to be very big in Central Asia, not like in Pakistan, for example. And I wonder, is that because it's always been that way, or is that because it was completely obliterated in the Soviet time? And so the people who are religious now, like my friend Aziz, are almost learning from scratch. And if they're learning from scratch, they're taking a far more like kind of Saudi model, like an orthodox model, which I think would be a shame because I think Sufism is a really good antidote to the kind of legalism that formal Islam can have sometimes. But anyway, that was that. Then we took a taxi to the fortress, which looks impressive from the outside, but as I said the day before, I thought it looked like a rebuild, and by God, it was. And it's a museum. We paid actually quite a bit to go in the museum, but it wasn't very good. And this is something that I think is important. It had been rebuilt and like rebranded only a few years ago, and it was an Imam Ali Rahman project. And I mean, first of all, like I think it was always going to struggle to be a good museum because although Khujand is a town of great antiquity, there was very little to put in the museum. There was a few shards of pottery and that's it. So there was one room that was like just dedicated to murals of Alexander the Great. Well, you didn't have that much of a connection there. And then there was like some standard stuff like a cavemen room and a bit of a Neolithic bit. And the actual kind of, because those were below ground, the castle bit was just like a big room. So as a museum, it was profoundly disappointing. But what was nice is I got talking to some some of the people who work there, and their students who were, I guess, getting a bit of experience. And it was nice to talk to them and, about their country and about the history. But yes, like I think Imam Ali Rahman decided to promote history, but a certain kind, and it's a bit Disneylandy. So that's that. We also took a taxi out to the other side of the river where we'd gone on the cable car before, because there was a rumour that there was the largest Lenin statue in Central Asia there, and I think he'd been moved from where the big monument that we'd seen the night before was. But it was still damn impressive. A huge Lenin statue, a great one. And there was also an amazing monument to internationalism. So we saw those, and we were glad we made the effort. And there was also like an avenue of heroes leading to the Lenin statue. It was great stuff. And then we took a taxi to where we were told like the shared taxis for our next destination leave from, and that's a place called Stavros. Now I can never say this right. Stavashan, which is a town that's just kind of like down the road. It doesn't look like an impressive place, but it's actually quite big, and it is one of the most historical places in Tajikistan. So we had to wait ages for that in this intense heat, and I think we got really ripped off on the price because we paid as much to get to Stavasham, which is like 20, 30 miles away, we did to get to bloody Dushanbe later, but never mind. But we got there. I dozed off. So, I mean, the landscape was very, like, barren and dry, the bit that I saw, but I dozed off pretty quick. This is something that I ended up doing a lot in Tajikistan, just dozing throughout all the journeys. I think it's called getting old. Also, being ill doesn't help. But anyway, got to this establishment, desperate for the toilet, and they dropped us off in the market. So it was another big bazaar which we walked through, which was very impressive, but we'd been to one that morning. And then in the end, we found like a tea shop, sat down, and got chatting to this like guy in my Russian, and just said, "Look, we're tourists. We want to see the stuff that there is." And he knew a guy with a car or with a taxi, so we went there. He brought him along, and so that was it. And so we had this car for the day around Establisham, and it was brilliant. The guy, yeah, he was a friendly enough guy, I suppose. Didn't speak any English, and our Russian isn't great, but we had a little bit of a chat. But we went. He first took us to an amazing Soviet memorial in the town, so we saw that, and then we went to the fortress on the hill above the town, and again, this beautiful from a distance, but it was an Imam Ali Rahman rebuild, only I think 2019 or something. So very well, what's original? Virtually nothing, I would imagine. And but interestingly, so we went in and we greeted at the door by this elderly gentleman, and he assured us he was the curator and the head archaeologist, and he was. He gave us this tour of his museum, but he was very, very critical of what had been done to it. So in the middle of this fortress, there was like a round amphitheatre that had been built by Imam Ali Rahman. But although he said it was the mayor of the town who built it, and he said it's wrong because amphitheatres are not part of our tradition, and there's nothing historically accurate about this. But I mean, at least it has some good artifacts. And one was a little whistle they found, thousands of years old, and he put a bit of water in it, and it sang like a nightingale. It was brilliant. But what I will say is, I don't think they need to worry about this amphitheatre being around in thousands of years because it was already falling apart, and it was only about 5 years old. But then he took us out to some of the digging that he'd been doing, and he is heading up these digs, and he'd found like old irrigation systems and water systems, and in the ground there was also a rebuilt brick structure. And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a Zoroastrian fire temple." He said, "But it's not accurate." Again, he said they put it in the wrong place. There's no attempt at accuracy here, and it's wrong what they did because there's real history underneath. I liked him. Interestingly, when we were in the museum, but there was like a gallery of war heroes from or notable citizens, and one of them was a general who'd been a general during the Afghanistan campaign. And he's like, "Oh, that's I don't remember if it's his father or his brother." I'm like, "Oh, right, okay." So that explains why you're such a prominent citizen and can criticise the powers that be, and he said, and I was actually, I think he was like a lieutenant or a colonel in there as well. So wonderful man, and you know, had great experience at this rather Disneylandish castle. Then our driver took us to, there's a mosque with a minaret that's famous. I'll put how old it was and the details because I don't have them with me at the moment. I mean, the minaret is this brick minaret. Apparently, they were like, "Oh, you can find it easily because it's the tallest building for miles around." Well, it ain't now because we could only see it when we went down a little alleyway, and there it was. You know, all the buildings around were taller, but it is an impressive minaret, and the mosque. Bits of it were impressive. Like some of the pillars, some of it was newer. But there was again another shrine in the grounds, and this one was open, but it was completely like derelict. So that's a shame. If I can find out who the shrine is, I will put it in the chat. But there we are. Yeah, and then he said, "Oh, I'll take you to somewhere else that's interesting." And he drove us to the old quarter of town, which was quite nice. It was, at one point there was a big drain running down the middle of the street, you know, several foot deep, but because he was driving either side of it, it was okay, and kids had to skittle out the way, you know, disturbed in their football games. But he took us to a madrasa. There was a couple of old guys sat outside, and they opened it up, and there was this wonderful madrasa, and you know, it was 16th century or something. We were there visitors that day. So Tajikistan, if it got itself geared up, there's some good stuff to see. And then what we did is we drove way out of town along an incredibly bumpy road for about 10-15 kilometres to the foot of a dam. And the reason we did this is because Tom had seen a video by one of his favourite YouTubers, a guy called Bald Bankrupt, and he goes to the former Soviet Union and seeks out monuments generally. And he found this amazing Lenin, like this massive bust of Lenin. And what it was built on the top of this dam to commemorate the building of the dam. So we went there. Now, by this time, I was absolutely knackered. So I saw it, obviously, from the bottom, but I stayed at the bottom of the hill. But Tom went all the way up, and I'll let him tell you about what it was like.
Здравствуйте. Я в Таджикистан. Добро пожаловать. Я в Tajikistan сейчас. Hello. I'm currently in Tajikistan. Welcome to Tajikistan. By me, absolutely glorious monument of Lenin. Fucking hell. Don't know if you see. There's gotta be 1,000 steps there. And I'm absolutely exhausted just running up them just to get this shot, to be honest. 42 degrees heat. All you can hear is crickets. Oh look, some fat-tailed sheep. I'll show them in another shot, but absolutely love it here. Tajikistan, beautiful country, and that is a glorious monument, my friends. I'll pass you back over to Uncle Travelling Man.
So Tom goes up and talks about that. I stayed down, but I did have a look at the workings of the dam, and there was the kind of sluice systems. It was quite interesting. Then we went back to where the shared taxis are. And the problem with Tajikistan, there is no public transport. Like, there don't even seem to be any buses, you know. And so it's all these shared cars that go when they go. And so we were sitting for ages in this bloody car, for an hour or so, and in this sweltering heat, waiting for it to fill up. I mean, we could people watch a bit. Notice there's a load of guys came out the mosque. I mean, they do seem to be quite religious there. But eventually it filled up, and we left. And I thought, oh, we might get to Dushanbe by like 9 o'clock at night or something. Absolute no chance. Massive journey. So it starts off, and I did actually stay awake for most of this. It starts off, and it's like the desolate countryside, but then the hills get bigger. But it's quite a good road, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it gets twisty. And then you go through a tunnel. And this tunnel was a project post-Soviet Union, and it was a bit of a disaster. Like, it was meant to be the flagship project of the new regime, but they built it very badly. I can't remember who built it. It was the Chinese or the Iranians or something. And it didn't have ventilation, so people were like choking in there. And it was also like about knee deep in water and stuff. Now, it was quite damp in places when we were there, but it's better than it was. And so we went through this tunnel, and then we were then in these massive mountains, and we're going down through there, and I mean by this time it was going dark, but it continued on, and we kind of descend down into a valley, and then you descend up or ascend up again, to all the way to another tunnel, and then you descend down and you're into Dushanbe. But our trip took longer than expected because as we were doing the second big ascent, we saw a car that was broken down. So we stopped to help them. It was a family in like a Mercedes, an old Mercedes was broken down. And then we also stopped not far short of Dushanbe to get the car washed. And I thought, well, that's a bit weird. It's 11 o'clock at night, but everyone was stopping there. And I did wonder, I don't know if this is true, I did wonder, is there like some rule in Dushanbe? Because it's a bit of a showcase city that you have to like have a clean car when you go in. Because everybody was washing their cars. Or maybe it was our driver who was just proud of his car, I don't know. But like everyone was doing it. It just seemed to be the thing that everyone pulls up, washes the car, and then goes on. And it wasn't that dirty before. So anyway, I don't know. And then we set off again, and then literally 5 minutes later, we stopped for a meal. And so we didn't get to Dushanbe till like midnight. The other thing is the driver every 2 or 3 seconds was on the phone to this guy, and he talked to him, and I'm just like, why does he have to phone every few seconds? It turned out the guy he was talking to was also driving the same route. He was in an Opel that had also stopped when we had this like broken down car thing. And I don't know, he was like, "Oh, I'm passing you now," and I'm a bit ahead or I'm a bit behind. I'm just like, why do you have to phone every few seconds? Really annoying. But anyway, we got to Dushanbe, but then we didn't because they stopped on the edge of town. And they're like, that's it. And I'm like, well, but our hotel's in the centre. And I'm like, we're not taking you there. And I think there's something whereby, like, if you're not Dushanbe registered, you can't go into the capital city. It's very Pyongyang. And so, like, because there was another taxi, and I said, "Oh, can you take me?" And he's like, "No, I'm a Khujand registered taxi." And so we had to basically flag down a taxi that was a Dushanbe taxi, and that took us into the city. And that was interesting because the guy clearly hadn't got a clue where he was going. Now, this he should do because the hotel, which is one of the major ones, it's a major old Soviet, it was the main Soviet hotel near the railway station. But he ain't got a clue. So we basically got a tour of Dushanbe by night because he went all over the place. And it's like, I mean, Tajikistan's a poor country, and yet it's the city of light and huge monuments that are all illuminated and vast. Like they're building a huge stadium. There's these vast palaces that they're building, and it is like Pyongyang. Pyongyang is the nearest I can compare it to. It is this surreal city. And if you read old guidebooks, they're just like, Dushanbe is really boring, there's nothing there. And now it's this showcase monument city, and at night it's like something a bit like, well, Pyongyang, I suppose, well, a bit like Dubai with all the lights, and it's all very over the top and nouveau riche. And it was very strange driving too, because our driver, who didn't speak any English, did speak some Russian, he decided that because we're English, we must really like hardcore, like hip hop, with a lot of swearing, and so we had very loud. So we're driving through the city, and he's put this like London hip hop on, like talk about down the East End and all this. These hip hop on, and it was awful. But I think he thought we'd like it because of the language. Anyway, dropped us off at our hotel, and this is one that Thomas really wanted to go to. The Hotel Point or Dushanbe. It's got two names. and it was the main Soviet era hotel, and he wanted a bit of retro Soviet stuff. All the reviews were saying it was awful and it hadn't moved on since the Soviet Union. And little did we realise how accurate they were. I mean, we booked it on Booking.com, got there, and the lady on the desk was like, I've got no booking. And we're like, well, we have. Here's the Booking.com one, look. Okay, I'll give you a room. And then whatever the price was. We're like, well, that's not what was quoted on Booking.com. Well, I can't give you one for that price. Like, but you're the ones advertising it at this point. Well, I can't give you it. What do you expect me to do? So in the end, we paid, it was about 35 quid a night, which for there is very expensive. For this room, we got taken up by this lady whose name was Lola, and she looked like a lady of the night, although she was very friendly, and opened this room, and it was basically like under restoration. Like, there was there was no bed in it, and it was being wallpapered. And she's like, "Oh, you can't sleep here, can you?" Well, we'll struggle a bit, yeah. So then she found us another room, and it was huge. It was obviously had been the height of luxury in its day, but it was absolutely awful. I'll talk about the hotel later anyway. That's why I didn't do a video then, because it was so bloody late and we were so bloody naked that it was straight to bed. And as for what happened the next day, well, that's another video. It's me, Uncle Travelling Matt. Travelling.